Rock Chalk Wolfpack.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Happy Friday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Massive men's basketball news came out of absolute nowhere on Thursday afternoon. NC State and Kansas of all schools, have scheduled a home-and-home effective this year. NC State men's basketball will travel out to Lawrence and play in the Fog in December of 2024. And then the Kansas Jayhawks will make the return trip to Raleigh to play in PNC Arena in 2025. Kenton, how big of a deal is this for NC State specifically?
Oh, it's a massive deal. I mean, the reality is this. Everybody talks about the Big 12 has been gaming the net ratings. They've been gaming the system.
They have.
There's been a lot of talk of that. And now it's NC State's time to show and prove. You are going to represent the ACC. You're going to represent, quote unquote, everything that's right with college sports. You're going to be the team that's like, hey, we're not taking the shortcut. We've taken the hard way through. Well, I wouldn't say that we've had the toughest out-of-conference schedule, but we're not scheduling the Island of Misfit Toys University Community College of Delta Valley State 8 times in
usually just once.
It's once or twice, but it's not, it's not that type of deal to where we're playing complete and utter nobodies and gaming the system. And I'm not saying Kansas in particular has done this, but the Big 12 as a whole has. And Kansas has been the de facto representative as they've been the cream of the crop. They've been a brand that won, I believe it was like 20 straight regular season championships. Either they were tied for or won outright, which is it's something unlike anything I've ever heard of, especially in the Big Three sports where there is so much parity. You rarely ever see that type of dominance. We talk about how dominant the Alabama Nick Saban teams were, and they didn't even win the SEC championship every year. We talk about Clemson with the ACC. They did not win the ACC championship every year for 15 or so straight years. That's not how it generally works in these sports. As much as Tom Izzo and them are doing it up in East Lansing, they haven't won the Big Ten every year. So this team in particular, very, very storied. And I'll tell you what, anytime the Wolfpack get a chance to make some old guy named Roy cry his heart out, it makes me happy. Because before that weird guy named Roy that walked around threatening to shoot people in red shirts with BB guns, which I still haven't forgotten, before he was busy doing that, he was saying Rock Chalk Jayhawk all the time. He coached some guy named Paul Pierce, who's now going on to have a very weird legacy after his NBA career, because Paul Pierce has got a weird case. Why is he around? But the weird thing is, the craziest thing about all of this is that, again, the full circle moment of getting to hurt a Dirty Foot Club legend once again with this home and home. You take care of business in Lawrence. You take care of business in Raleigh. You make the Wolfpack faithful happy, and you make the people that are putting together the net and all that maybe sit up in their seat a little bit and go, what's going on here, if you can find a way to win those games.
Real question, what are the odds that Roy Williams is at this game at Allen Fieldhouse this December? Just to spurn NC State one last time. I wouldn't put it past him.
Roy is petty and he's got a lot of time on his hands, got a lot of money. He's going to be there sitting front and center because he believes, like most of the nation believes, that the Wolfpack have no shot, that the Wolfpack are going to get dominated. They're going to get ran up out of that field house, crying and screaming back to Raleigh. But I believe Roy thought the same thing last year during a certain tournament where he just knew It was time, the clock had struck midnight. Oh, what a day. What a wonderful day. We get to take care of the Wolfpack and get us a ACC title all in one. Well, how'd that work out for you? How'd it work out, Roy? Yeah. Well, anywho, I'm sure he'll be there. I'm sure he'll find a seat in Lawrence. I'm sure he'll have the best seat in the house. And Coach Keats, I hope you make the best seat the most uncomfortable seat. Because let me tell you something. It's about love and hate. We're the biggest haters. We're the biggest haters. You got to be the biggest haters in this.
On a real note here, this is so awesome for NC State. And we've talked a lot about the dividends coming off of winning a conference championship and then making that run to the Final Four. Just about a week or so ago, we talked about the Maui Invitational. Maybe that had been in the works for a couple of years or so, but the timing of that is perfect for exposure after a run like this. And this home and home with Kansas is just yet another byproduct of postseason success. And it goes hand in hand with all of the same factors: recruiting, national brand awareness, just overall eyes on your program a lot these days. And so for NC State making a trip out to Kansas, who may or may not be considered the number one preseason team once November rolls around, I could not be more excited for this opportunity. And we've even played Kansas pretty closely a couple times in the last decade or so. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the last time we saw them was in the Bahamas, like maybe a year ago, I think it was. And we nearly beat them at the time.
Yeah. Christian Braun was on that team, right?
Grady Dick is who you're thinking of. Grady Dick.
Grady Dick. Yeah, he shot the lights out. Yeah, he shot the lights out.
Like that. And we still almost pushed Kansas to the end there. So we've had a couple of run-ins with Kansas over the years, but nothing like this, at least not for a very long time. And so to see NC State travel out and play at the Phog, that is a super cool moment, not just in the game itself, but for NC State fans. If you can, and if you are able to, I would encourage anyone to make this trip, because this is one of the most storied basketball arenas in all of college basketball. I mean, you could take it a step further. Some of sports in general, this is like an all-time moment for NC State to play in this arena. So it's a humongous deal. And then to see Kansas on the flip side come to PNC Arena in 2025, it's slightly less cool, but I mean, the magnitude is still a very real thing. And Kenton, you talked about the non-conference schedule for NC State these last couple of years. It hasn't been a strength, you could say, but just another product of making this postseason run. You're starting to see bigger names pop up on that non-conference schedule now. And Kansas is one of the bigger names you could possibly draw. I know NC State was flirting, I think, with Marquette for a little while just recently. I don't know if that'll come to fruition, but these early Thanksgiving week tournaments and scheduling a home and home with Kansas, that is a sign of progress. At least we hope. And we've talked about this season not being a one-off. Things like this help you ensure that it might not be. And so it's so important to make it back to the dance this year. Keep that brand recognition up. That's how you continue to schedule more of these home and home games with one of the premier brands in the sport.
Interesting that Marquette wouldn't want to play us. I wonder why. But anywho, no, in all seriousness, you're absolutely right. You talk about brand awareness and all that. This game is not going to be on Bally Sports. It's not, right? And obviously, we know Bally went under. We know no games are going to be on Bally Sports, thank the Lord. But in all seriousness, this game is going to be most likely nationally televised because, again, Kansas is a huge brand. Most of their basketball games are nationally televised anyway. And then you add in a brand like NC State, you're adding fuel to the fire. It's going to be a great time. This is going to be a great one-on-one for all parties involved. And again, if you can steal two of these things up off of the Jayhawks, if you can take down the top-ranked team in the nation early in the season, interesting. It'll be very funny for the Big 12, but not funny ha-ha, funny weird.
Allen Fieldhouse, the Phog, is not a place that Kansas will lose at very often. I remember, I think it was BYU that got them this past year, and such a big deal was made out of that because of how rare it is. If NC State goes out to Kansas and steals a game away from them, you will feel that throughout the airwaves of college basketball. That is a victory that shakes the nation. And for the country to see you go to Kansas and win that game right after making that run to the Final Four, you're going to continue to turn heads. And if you turn heads in that way, again, it just keeps connecting to all those boxes I keep mentioning. So Very, very cool setup to schedule a home and home with Kansas. It'll begin this year. Like I mentioned, we're traveling out to Lawrence in December of 2024, and then Kansas will revisit us in Raleigh in 2025. Just another big-time win for the program, and things are continuing to look up for NC State basketball. Coming up next, we're getting into NC State baseball's tough loss in Charlotte. They take an 8-1 loss at the hands of the Duke Blue Devils, and what that'll mean for regionals beginning next week after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor of the day is FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home huge wins of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You name it, they got it, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Middle portion of our Friday show, now getting into NC State baseball's loss to Duke on Thursday night in the ACC basically quarterfinal. Duke has now won Pool C, so Duke will advance to the semifinals. NC State is now out of the ACC tournament. Tough 8-1 loss. Sam Heifel, Duke absolutely erupted on him for 6 runs, and I think it was the 4th inning. And after that, it just kind of went all downhill from there. And the Bats, after being extremely hot against Virginia Tech just a night sooner, could not get much of anything going. Only had 1 hit for the majority of the game before he had a couple later on. Kenton, are you concerned about this 8-1 loss to Duke? Do you think this really affects much of anything about the postseason coming next week?
The reality is I really don't look at this game as too much of an indicator or anything like that. I have said about this team all along, I don't know what it is about them. When they play teams in one-off situations, it's like they forget. It's like Ricky Bobby in that interview. I don't know what to do with my hands. And it's like, play baseball, maybe. Try that. You guys are pretty good at it when you find out you got a series against the team, especially if they got a number by their name. But for whatever reason, when we have one-off games against teams, we seem to fall flat. This was another time where we seemingly fell flat. But thank God, luckily, the NCAA tournament does not go off of one game, one-offs. It is all series if you can get it done in that regard. So, hopefully the series win streak continues. And if that happens, congratulations, y'all. We'll go to Omaha. And this time, there will be no contact tracing.
Don't speak too soon. But no.
Fair enough.
But no, I think it's a good point because in some senses, it kind of did feel like a midweek game in that the offense for NC State was kind of cold early. I don't even know if I should say cold. It's just that we were hitting missiles right at people. Noah Souls had a double robbed of him early. Left fielder made a spectacular catch. Garrett Pennington was peppering the Duke fielders all night, just couldn't buy a hit for most of the game. And Duke is extremely talented offensively. And my only real gripe with this game, and it's not really a big gripe, I do think that they left Sam Heifel in just a tad too long. I think that they let things fester just a tad too long until it eventually erupted. And he gave up, I believe it was 3 home runs in the same inning. And after that, it was kind of all she wrote. But overall, I mean, Sam Heifel had a very good beginning of the game. He was inducing a lot of hard contact, kind of what NC State was experiencing. Duke had a lot of hard contact just right at folks. Serrano was getting a workout in center field, deep center field at that, but it was never really amounted to any damage until it did. And then basically too late for damage control. So this kind of is what it is. I'm not so concerned with a one-off loss like Kenton was mentioning. It's not going to affect our ability to host a regional. We're still going to be within the top 16. I don't think we're going to reach the top 8. I was saying more than likely we had to get to the final, if not win the final, to do that. So that is what it is. However, NC State's going to host a regional next week, and that's a lot of cause for a lot of excitement. And this is our first regional we've hosted since 2018. So it's been, 6 years since we've done this? All we can do at this point is wait to see what kind of draw we get on Monday. Hopefully we don't see ECU because they may have lost out on their chance to host. That would be not a good scenario for NC State. But nonetheless, if they continue to stay hot like they have been for the last month and a half, I have a lot of faith that they will emerge victorious of the Raleigh Regional. And then we're also going to have to see who we get paired in for hopes of a potential super regional. If NC State could find a little bit of bracket luck on the other side of that, who knows? Perhaps we host a Raleigh super regional. And if you find yourself in that scenario, you might just be on a plane back to Omaha. So not so concerned with this loss to Duke. Certainly doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth, but hey, I mean, it is what it is. So they're into the NCAA next weekend. We're still waiting on the draw, but I fully expect the Pac-9 to stay hot.
Yeah, for sure. This isn't a situation where, and the biggest thing I want to say here, I know that we're all going to say things to make us feel better in this situation, but the thing that you need to say to make yourself feel better in this situation the most is that this team has shown a propensity to kind of have these times. And not just this team has a propensity to have these times, it's also kind of baseball. Like, the more I learn about baseball, the more I learn. Some games, it just doesn't work out for you. And like you talked about, there was a lot of hard contact that if that exit angle was literally half a degree different, I'm not saying it leaves the park altogether, but, it ends up banging up against the wall and you get yourself a guy on base or you get yourself an easy double. And that just didn't happen tonight. So it is what it is. You live with it. It's not ideal. But last night's game does not determine this team's trajectory for the NCAA tournament at all.
Yeah, very well said. That's kind of my underlying point. And if you watch baseball long enough, eventually you will hear someone say, well, that's just baseball. This loss to Duke tonight is like the epitome of that. When NC State's making pretty decent contact, but it's just right at someone all night, Duke will kind of induce weak contact, but it'll be flared into a gap, and then they get runners on. Next thing you know, it's a grand slam. Now it feels like the game is over. Sometimes that's just baseball. Baseball is the weirdest, wackiest, at times nonsensical sport that there is. And so a lot of times folks kind of overlook that and just rage quit when you go down 6 runs in the 5th inning. Sometimes it happens like that. It happens in the major leagues. That's why they say in baseball, if you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. It's such a hard game to play. So not making excuses. It was a bad loss. Again, certainly leaves a sour taste in your mouth because you wanted another shot at that ACC title. But we're going to keep it pushing. Again, Raleigh Regional next weekend. That's a really big deal. Looking forward to an electric environment and hoping they can keep this postseason run running hot. We're going to round out our Friday show with Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second sponsor of the day is Gametime. If you're looking for NBA playoff tickets or maybe even NHL playoff tickets, not in Raleigh, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying playoff tickets. With their last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and etc. If you need NC State Tennessee tickets for the Mayo Classic this coming September, again, you got to get over to Gametime. Toggling their all-in pricing feature will show your total upfront with 0 surprises at checkout. You can also see a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect upon arrival. So take the guesswork out of buying playoff tickets, college football tickets, soon-to-be NCAA baseball tickets, all on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Rounding out our Friday show, it's now time for Fan Friday, addressing our top comments of the week. Let's hit it. First one comes from Albert Bennett. He says, I wouldn't really be too concerned about the linebackers. I'm more interested in the O-line. And I'll tell you what, I agree here. We've talked at length about probably needing or maybe even looking into adding a linebacker or 2 to this football roster before we consider it complete. But the more we've talked about it, the more confidence I've gained in Tony Gibson in rearranging a couple things, getting the most out of his guys. I suddenly feel a little bit better about the depth at linebacker. And so now my attention turns to the O-line. We saw how important it was to have a healthy, ready-to-go offensive line last year. Early in the season, it was not all there. it was not clicking. By the end of the year, we saw a much more cohesive unit. And then at the last game of the regular season, we were leaning on the Dirty Foot Club. So the O-line will be extremely, extremely, extremely important to this team's success this year. I mean, it is every year because they often say it starts up front, which is true year in and year out. But what we're trying to accomplish on offense with all the new weapons we've acquired, year 2 of Robert and I, it quite literally starts up front. This is a big-time bag year for Anthony Belton, Tim McKay, Jacarius Peak. All those guys are looking to have a big-time season. It also starts up front with Notre Dame transfer Zeke Correll, who has to be the captain up there in the middle. So the O-line, don't be overlooking the boys on the O-line because, again, you can attribute a very large portion of the success that this team may have to how successful they are up front.
I would disagree with Albert here. As much as I love Tony Gibson, as much as I think he can get the job done with whatever you give him, I'm still more worried about them than I am the offensive line for this reason. I think, and I want to be very honest here, I don't think we've downgraded any position from last year except maybe center. Maybe. And that's a maybe. That's not a guarantee. That's not like I'm 1,000% sure that Zeke is not the player that Dylan McMahon was. I'm not willing to take that step. But I can tangibly look at the linebacking core and the film that I saw in the spring game and say, even amongst the starters, the talent isn't there. Now, is there concern about the O-line depth? Absolutely. We are 2 injuries away, potentially, knocking on wood right now, 2 injuries away from the picture looking very different. I am not going to deny that, not going to say that it isn't a reality. But with that being said, even with all the horses in the stable for the linebacking core, I'm still a little concerned. I can't shake that feeling that I'm like, I didn't see bad linebacker play in the spring game. I saw some stuff that I'm downright like, who are these guys? When did we ever coach that type of stuff? No offense. I'm sure that they'll get better. I'm sure that they'll improve. But there was just a lot of really concerning things. And, Grayson talked about how with all the linebackers we have, how many of them are either true freshmen or redshirt freshmen or have never played meaningful snaps? It's a little concerning.
Next one comes from Jason, NCSU 2007. He says, I'd be curious to hear a similar NIL breakdown for freshmen, sophomore, junior, senior, and grad student athletes. Is there a premium on experience or potential? What arguments can be made for staying in school if the average junior or senior NIL money is close to a UFL contract or NFL practice squad contract for those fringe pro talent players? So, yes, this is in regard to our conversation on Thursday. There was a little bit of a look behind the curtain of some NIL averages by position. To answer your question, Jason, I do think it's a fine balance between experience or potential. Obviously, a lot more on the side of experience because proven talents are obviously what you're going to go after. But for NC State, I think of a guy like a Noah Rogers. Didn't play at all for Ohio State. From scouting him very closely in high school, you know what he could be. So what's the NIL look like for a guy like Noah Rogers? Well, obviously don't have the number. That'd be something that's very interesting to look into. And then conversely, you have a guy like KC, just a freshman last year, but was one of the most dynamic freshmen in the entire country. So in his instance, you're kind of paying for both potential and experience. So there's definitely a balance to be had here. When you're looking at fringe pro talent players, I'd have to imagine that NIL would be a much heavier factor to be weighed there. I mean, perhaps it's apples to oranges, but I look at basketball in particular. I think basketball is where you see the biggest impact in that scenario in particular. Because the NBA draft is so short, a lot of guys, it kind of comes down to, am I going to play overseas or am I going to stay here in college, make probably more money, and then I'll see what I can get after that. So there's certainly a lot of factors to be considered if players are to be falling under that category. In football, I also think it's definitely going to lean more toward NIL, but I don't think we've seen as many examples in that quite yet.
Yeah, and I think that there's one factor that you're missing in here, Jason, in terms of experience or potential. There's a third variable that needs to be accounted for, and that one is production. It's how often do you get the job done? As Jesse Ventura would say, how do you get to the Baja? That's what's important here, right? Like if you're a receiver like Kevin Concepcion, it's no longer about potential for him. It's about you have experience, you have produced at a high level, therefore we're going to pay you at a high level. Don't get me wrong. I think the potential part of this, you have to pay freshmen, especially five-star freshmen and all that, and that's a potential thing. But once you get into your sophomore, junior, senior seasons, if you don't have the production to match up, what's it all about? The reason that Cam Ward could demand well above what the average quarterback is making is because it's not because, oh, Cam has a ton of experience, because there are tons of quarterbacks who are 6-year guys that are not making a mil, not making $2 million or you know, whatever that deal is in particular. But there are not many guys who have his production, who have Heisman level or player of the year, conference player of the year production maxed in with 5 years or 4 or 5 years of experience. So I think that those are potential is important. Experience is important, but it also, you pay for potential to get them on campus, and you pay for production once they get there, is my personal belief.
Next one comes from Flippin' Pack. They say, have loved to see the development of Cisse. I saw Gibby tear into him at Duke, and you could tell he took it, learned, and showed his growth the rest of the year. So yes, exactly. We also refer back to Cisse getting torched a little bit in the latter half of that VMI game. Of course, that was some of his first action he's seen at the collegiate level. But Kent and I had both texted each other during that game and said, watch how Cisse will build off of this. I'd be damned if he hadn't shown a lot of productivity and development in such a short window of time. And that is the reason for a lot of our anticipation and excitement for Brandon Cisse in just year 2. I couldn't be more thrilled about a young talent being across from Aiden White, learning from one of the best in the country, and really getting to see how he gets tested this year. Because make no mistake about it, teams are still not going to want to throw at Aiden White this year. So who does that leave to be targeted a lot? Brandon Cisse. That creates a massive step in development for him in year 2, and I'm very confident that he will be the one to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, the reality is very simple. Cisse's development can be attributed to being coached hard, to having those hard moments and all that. But his story is the story of the Wolfpack. It's the story of life. It's not about him showing up and being dominant from day one and never having a bad game. He had bad moments. He had moments that he had to bounce back from. But that's what makes players what they are. Everybody gets knocked down. What happens afterwards? Do you get back up? Do you figure out, okay, I got knocked down because I wasn't controlling distance or my footwork was bad? Do you learn why you got beat? You learn, oh, my eye discipline was bad. I didn't play through his hands. I reacted too early. I got jumpy and physically missed time, whatever the case may be. You learn from it and you figure it out. And you implement that into your game going forward. And if you have the talent, the ability, the athletic instincts, it all works out, which we clearly see that Cisse has in spades, as well as the mentality to go in and fix it. So we love to see it.
And our last one here comes from Carla Jenkins TV. She says, Tennessee game is a barometer game. It shows NC State where it's at nationally. I'm glad that NC State is getting these types of games. That means people view NC State as a more serious contender. Now it's time to capitalize upon these opportunities. Yeah, Carla is exactly right here. We've already talked about the impact and the magnitude of this game. We already know it's a primetime slot, 7:30 on ABC. Still keeping my fingers crossed for College Game Day. I think it makes a lot of sense if you look at the rest of the slate. And it's just another massive opportunity for NC State. I still, because it was one of the biggest games I could ever dream of, think about this game that we played at Clemson 2 years ago when it was College Game Day. That at the time might have been the biggest game in program history. If it wasn't one, it's probably in the top 3. This game against Tennessee, I don't know if it's top 3, but it's pretty freaking close. A ranked matchup in this season where we have massive aspirations. Again, prime time. NC State is finding themselves receiving these type of opportunities on these types of stages because people are noticing the type of success you're having every single year. I've seen more offseason chatter about Dave Doeren this offseason than I think I have in the rest of his entire tenure. He is now finally starting to catch the attention of people around the country. This program is starting to finally catch the attention of people around the country. For NC State to have such a marquee matchup in just week 2 of the season, that is another product of people starting to pay attention to this program. It's a humongous opportunity, and it is now overdue that Dave Doran cashes in on one of these things.
Yeah, and Carly, you're absolutely right. The same way that we talked about the Kentucky 1-1 earlier, the Tennessee game is a very similar experience. This is a time where you have to show the world what you're made of, but it's a little different because the football team is supposed to be further along than where the basketball team is, despite all of their success last season. The reality is this Tennessee game is absolutely going to be a barometer game from a lot of standpoints. This will be the best defensive line that I think this offensive line has seen since, I want to say, Clemson 2 years ago. I think that defensive line was freaky. That was something different. And Devin Leary started that game, and that's probably the one that I would say, like, oh boy, that's the last time we saw a defensive line like what you're going to see against Tennessee. With that being said, this is still a game. Nico is a superstar. He's a superstar in the making, rather. Hopefully he doesn't shine like the brightest star on the field in, Bank of America Stadium, but he's prime time. This is NC State's opportunity to show, hey, we're prime time too. Grayson McCall is prime time. Noah Rogers is prime time. Jordan Waters is prime time. Zeke Corral is prime time. Davin Vann is prime time. Aiden White is prime time. We've got prime time guys as well as everybody else. Our guys can get it done like nobody's business as well. We are special too. We can get it done. Come see about us.
That'll do it for us here on Friday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments down in the comment box. Tell us what you think about NC State basketball scheduling a home-and-home with Kansas starting effectively this year. We'll be traveling out to Lawrence in December of 2024. Tell us what you thought about NC State baseball's loss to Duke on Thursday night, and maybe if that will affect the team at all as they move into the NCAA tournament next weekend. Any other thoughts you have on your mind, throw them down in the comment box. I'll be sure to get to each and every one of those, and mash that subscribe button if you have not already. Enjoy your weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. Please be safe with your friends and family, however you choose to spend it. We will see you all on Monday. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.